also want to invite the whole committee. You received an invitation from my office to attend an event tomorrow in the Capitol Theater Center. I have a 92-year-old Holocaust survivor who's the feature of a new documentary called Big Commitment. She's 4'8" tall and grandmother, and she's lived in my district. She creates a beautiful space. She told a beautiful story of her life, showing remembers and that she'll be present in your work. Join us at 5:30 at the Capitol Theater. All right, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. It seems like just a couple weeks ago we were working on the 2018 bill, because we were. And now we are ready to get to work on our 2019 legislation. We're going to have to move quickly, given where we are in the calendar. So I appreciate everybody coming to the hearing this week. We've got two more hearings tomorrow, so it'll be a busy week. And I know that there are a lot of hearings on the other 11 subcommittees going, so people may come and go, and it's because they have other legislative business. I want to thank the Chief of Police for attending today, along with his team, and I appreciate all of your service to our to the Capitol, to the visitors that come here, constituents, to the people that come to our buildings to conduct the business of the American people. Of course, the elected representatives who have been targets of many threats over the last year, and some of which were acted out. And, the work of your team at the shooting in Virginia last year was remarkable. I'm thankful for the lives that were saved because of folks who work for you. So thanks for being here. I thank my team. I have Jenny, Tim, and Joe in my office that are here with us today, and we'll get started on the 2019 bill. I'd like to welcome all the subcommittee members back. As we start consideration of the fiscal year 2019 budget request, I look forward to working together again on putting together a legislative branch appropriations bill that adequately addresses the needs of our agencies so they can carry out their respective missions while at the same time balancing fiscal restraint. We have important work before us in being good stewards of taxpayer dollars as they are spent on the legislative branch, and I'm glad to formally begin our hearing season. I want this committee to work in a bipartisan and collaborative basis as the tradition of this committee, and I invite our members to recommend additional site visits or items that which they believe would be important for us to achieve our mission in writing this upcoming bill. This year, as chairman, I have decided to expand the number of hearings we will hold. Our subcommittee will consider a fiscal year 2019 budget request of $4.9 billion, which is $200 million over the fiscal year 2018 allocation. I felt it was important to hear from more of our agencies through in-person testimony in order to more thoroughly scrutinize their requests and help fulfill our responsibility of ensuring every taxpayer dollar appropriated is done so responsibly. Today, I'd like to welcome the Capitol Police back to the committee to hear their testimony regarding their fiscal year 2019 budget request. Testifying before us, we have Chief Matthew Verderosa, accompanying him is Assistant Chief Stephen Sund and Chief Administrative Officer Richard Braddock. I'd like to take a moment again to thank all the officers and civilians of the Capitol Police for their service. Their presence allows members and staff to freely conduct and safely conduct the people's work and ensures the visitors can safely enjoy their time on Capitol Hill. As mentioned, the shooting in Alexandria last June is still very much on all of our minds, as this incident shook all of us in this Capitol building. And I'm pleased to hear that Special Agent David Bailey has returned to work and that Special Agent Crystal Griner continues to make strides in her recovery. They are both heroes and have been an inspiration to us all. In response to the shooting, the department identified the need for additional funds that could go to remediating some of the lessons learned and bolstering their efforts to make sure something like this doesn't happen again. Although a bit delayed, I'm happy those funds were made available in the recently passed omnibus. Chief, your budget request for fiscal year 2019 is $456.4 million. This is approximately a 7% increase from the fiscal year 2018 enacted level. I understand the Capitol Police is continuously asked to expand their role, from securing the O'Neill House office building to garage security to more pre-screeners to additional dignitary protection, and the list goes on. Chief, I appreciate your leadership and efforts in trying to meet these additional responsibilities, while at the same time making sure the day-to-day operations of the department continue. Having said that, this committee has a responsibility to scrutinize this request and to take a holistic approach across all the legislative branch agencies when determining where to allocate funds. Since sequestration, the Capitol Police annual appropriations have increased more than 32%, while most legislative branch agencies only received a modest increase. Obviously, we have many competing priorities, but keeping our Capitol safe, making sure that we adequately train and support our officers, making sure they have the tools and equipment to do their jobs remains the top priority of this committee. And we're so thankful for the work of each and every one of you and the folks that report to you and work to keep us safe. We're going to come back to Ranking Member Ryan's opening remarks. And at this point, Chief, would you like to go ahead and make your opening statements to be made part of the record?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And members of the subcommittee, I appreciate the opportunity to present the department's budget request for fiscal year 2019. I'm joined today by Chief of Operations Assistant Chief Steve Sund, Mr. Richard Braddock, my Chief Administrative Officer, as well as members of my executive team. We're also joined here today by Acting Inspector General Michael Bolton and USCP Fraternal Order of Police Chairman Gus Papathanassiou. First, I'd like to thank the committee for its unwavering support of the United States Capitol Police and for providing the necessary funding to support our personnel and operations. Since I last appeared before the committee, the department has effectively managed an ever-increasing number of demonstrations, has swiftly responded to critical incidents, civil disobedience, and has investigated numerous credible threats made against members of Congress and the Capitol. Most notably, our mission to protect and serve was thrust into the national spotlight on June 14, 2017, after a gunman fired shots during Republican Congressional baseball team's practice in Alexandria, Virginia. And our own highly trained special agents responded swiftly and heroically, preventing a serious tragedy. I'm happy to report that both agents are back to work. Though Crystal is back on a limited basis, we expect full recovery as well. She'll be back to full duty by the end of the year anniversary. The department also received its 6th consecutive accreditation from the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. We were awarded CALIA's Gold Standard with Excellence, the highest rating a law enforcement agency can receive during the evaluation process. This distinction is a real testament to the professionalism of our workforce and demonstrates that we consistently implement the best law enforcement practices. I'm extremely proud of the department and our responses to the extraordinary events over the past year. No one could have predicted all that we've encountered, but our officers are trained to face each crisis and challenge, and we must always be prepared to face the unimaginable. Mr. Chairman, the support of the committee and the Capitol Police Board has contributed to our success in achieving our mission, as well as our ability to recognize and address the dynamic nature of the current threat. We're truly grateful for your keen understanding of the complexity of our mission and the challenges that we face. We've developed our fiscal year 2019 budget with a focus on continuing to equip and prepare our workforce to be agile and responsive to the operations of Congress and to keeping the U.S. Capitol complex safe and secure. Our overall fiscal year 2019 budget request is $456.4 million and represents an increase of 7% over fiscal year 2018 enacted level. As we experienced on the ball field in Alexandria last June, occurrences of homegrown violent lone wolf episodes are on the rise. Across the world, we continue to see more and more terrorist organizations attack public venues. As a result, our officers must look at every event on the Capitol grounds, whether it's a mass demonstration, a concert, traffic stops, or even the simple act of members crossing the street for a vote as a potential target or threat. Based on the increase in terrorist and domestic mass casualty events, and upon studying the tactics displayed by known assailants, we continuously review our operational and tactical postures to ensure that we're taking every measure possible to maintain the security of the complex, while allowing the legislative process to continue to function in an open environment and protecting individuals' First Amendment rights. Therefore, working in concert with the Capitol Police Board, the department is continuing to deploy additional screening of various means throughout the complex. This involves deploying security measures to better secure and screen at building access. Our fiscal year 2019 budget request includes base funding for 1,943 sworn and 420 civilian positions, and requests half-year funding for an additional 72 officers, sworn officers, and 20 civilian positions. These additional sworn personnel will be utilized to enhance the department's ability to detect, impede, and address the threats that currently exist and continue to evolve. Additionally, we're requesting one civilian position for the Office of the Inspector General for the purposes of furthering their work on addressing potential cybersecurity threats. Our request includes funding for items such as protective travel, supplies and equipment, management systems and technology upgrades, and other non-personnel needs. Funding for these requirements will address increases in operating costs, including investments in training, recruiting, and outfitting new employees, replacing key equipment and systems that are outdated and becoming obsolete, restoring annual levels reduced in previous fiscal years to meet the vital department needs, Mr. Chairman, the Capitol Police is the only department in the nation that does what we do with such high visibility in the way in which we do it. Mission focus will always be the key focus to our ability to be successful, to serve and protect, and to ensure our employees go home safely every day. The Congress relies on us to do our job, that they may do the people's work in a free and open manner in the people's house. In closing, I just want to assure the committee that the Capitol Police is committed to always being at the ready to ensure that the Capitol complex is safe and secure. We'll continue to work closely with you and your committee staff to ensure that we meet the needs and the expectations of Congress, as well as our mission, in a reasonable and responsible manner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Apologize for being late. I want to thank our guests here. I'm going to be very, very brief and just say we're very much look forward to hearing what you have to say and trying to help you out the best we can and also talk through some of the issues we have. So thank you. Yield back.
Someone yields back. Chief, I'll get questions started here a little bit. One of the things we've discussed over the last year or so relates to the retirement age waiver. And, it's my understanding that the waiver has been granted now for several years. And there's been some discussion about making the waiver permanent. Could you explain to the committee what the age requirements are, how the waivers work, and what options we'd have before us as a Congress to continue that waiver or go back to current law or to make some permanent changes?
Yes, sir. It's a great question. The Capitol Police Retirement Act requires mandatory retirement at age 57. We are on parity as an agency with other law enforcement agencies in the federal government. We get the same law enforcement retirement benefits that other agencies receive, and that the ability to retire after a certain number of years service, the ability to receive a Social Security supplement, the ability to maintain a rigorous workforce is the reasoning for the 57. The Capitol Police Board has the ability to grant a waiver for if it's in the public interest to extend the retirement age till age 60. During the fiscal years that began last year, we approached the board and we asked the board to make that waiver for the purpose of keeping and retaining employees while we endeavor to build up our ranks to cover the board initiatives that we talked about over the years. It's a multi-year initiative for the security of house garage security, portal scanners, pre-screeners, alike. It's a great tool, and over the years since the Capitol Police retirement has been in place, the board has waived that mandatory retirement age on several occasions. The last group blanket coverage was when we merged with the Library of Congress. So those employees were able to, when they came over to the Capitol Police, maintain in an attempt to get to the 20-year requirement for service to be vested. I believe that it's important to work for all of the best benefits that I can for my employees. They really do work, they diligently work to keep this facility safe. In raising the age, it provides us with the ability to maintain people. My only concern really what we want to do is make sure that we don't jeopardize the law enforcement benefits that we were. So it took us so long to achieve in terms of OPM's interpretation of the So if we could raise the age in terms of 60 without losing those parity we have with other law enforcement agencies in terms of retirement, I think it's something that is a viable option. Right now, we have until September 30th, 2020, the waiver for the mandatory retirement until age 60 for all employees still employed at this time. We also have raised the maximum hiring age from 37 to 40 so that we can bring in folks who may not have met that mark but still would be able to achieve a 20-year retirement. All of these aspects and all of these initiatives go toward the purpose of retaining as many employees as we can so we get to that FTE level that would assist us in providing for all of the security initiatives.
Well, it seems like you're certainly thinking through the different aspects of the money that can be saved, what's best for the employees, what's best for public safety, what's best to have a trained person there who knows their job, has been on the job for a long time, and knows what they're doing versus bringing in a new person. There's training costs, all those factors. To me, it seems like having this done on a sort of case-by-case or year-by-year basis creates a lot of uncertainty for your people. And so I'd love to work with you guys in trying to come up with maybe something that's a little more permanent so that we have some more predictability.
Absolutely. And my council is going to reach out to OPM to work with a retirement specialist to make sure that any changes that would be made would be consistent with retaining the law enforcement benefits that we achieved, and also achieving the goal of keeping the experienced workforce possibly to age 60. I'm happy to work with your staff.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I want to just talk about event security. If you can tell us, again, given last year's situation that we all dealt with and the demands of us, especially in an election year and how busy we are these days, can you talk to us a little bit about any adjustments that you may have made over the course of the last year, lessons learned, and what we could expect coming into this year?
Certainly. We'll conduct an assessment on events that are occurring that involve members of Congress in both houses. We will look at the threat stream, all of the intelligence that's available. Obviously, there are those who come under the radar, known to law enforcement, pose immediate known threat. However, nonetheless, are a serious threat. Given that decision scenario and based on additional resources provided, which are much appreciated, we are moving towards providing a more elaborate security blanket. And it's really dictated by the type of activity. So if you have an outdoor activity, obviously it's going to drive more personnel to cover. For instance, we will be conducting sweeps, and we will put post standards in areas that we believe are potentially problematic or provide a level of risk to members. We have a process in place where requests are made through the Sergeant at Arms office. Sergeant at Arms delegate that task to our Protective Services Bureau. We'll conduct the open source and any classified investigation, look at threat assessment towards any type of activity may be known, and then we will assess the need for personnel based on time of day, venue, type of activity that's going on, notoriety, how much information is out there. Is this a planned or scheduled event? All of those types of things go into the analysis. And once that analysis is completed, we assign staffing to it. And that staffing can include not only dignitary protection agents, it can include uniformed officers, it can include bomb technicians, SWAT team members, undercover officers, out and about who may come to our attention. So we have a holistic approach to securing events, particularly large scale. Anytime we move large numbers of members, we'll do it in an organized fashion. The smaller.
How has this changed? And, has there been any changes that we can talk about this level?
We're absolutely placing more emphasis on local events, outdoor events, where we're deploying more personnel and equipment in order to provide a safe environment, whatever the issue is, whether it's a ball game, whether it's a rally. We certainly, for large-scale events here on the Capitol grounds, we have a structure in place that we employ. We are going to change some of our parameters in terms of summer concert series, open air event. We deploy an all hands on deck, all capability type response for large gatherings here in the Capitol. So you'll see there'll be some things that you do see in some undercover officers who use leverage technology. All of those things that I can talk about open, and some of the things that we talk about in a closed environment to ensure that we have a holistic approach. We absolutely are looking at the types of meetings and types of that occur, particularly with groups of members, but we're also applying a very deep focus on events from district. We work very closely with member staff, the law enforcement liaison in each office, to ensure that we have law enforcement coverage that can out of DC.
And how is the interfacing going with local law enforcement, whether it's here in the district or at a retreat that we do, or how is, do you feel like that is
We get out.
adequate?
Yes, sir. We get outstanding commitment from our partners in law enforcement. Here in DC, it's really no question. We have a great working relationship with the Metropolitan Police Department, FBI, Secret Service, Federal Protective Service, and I've never seen it in my 33 years, and I've talked extensively with the Assistant Chief about this, who has a great experience from the Metropolitan Police side of the house point of view. I've never seen a better working relationship between threat information, any type of intelligence gathering, or any other type of information that comes forward. We all realize that these events, there's no small events. They're all major events. They all have to be, you have to apply a level of security to public events. It's the times, it's the way we are today. This is the state that we're in. Outside the DC region, we get tremendous support from the local entities, the local city government, state police, whether it be university police department. We share the information that we've gathered. We'll make an assessment on all of these events. We'll assess them. We'll share the information with your law enforcement liaisons in your offices. We'll share it with the local law enforcement. If we deem that, based on the information that we've gathered, that it's going to be problematic or there's going to be disruption, we may provide additional resources. We may deploy our own personnel as well. So it's really dependent on the type of event, the particular circumstance. Last year, we did, I think, over 400 for members, both House and Senate, in terms of that outside coordination. And we welcome the requests from the member office. That's part of the funding that we receive in the 18 goes towards personnel that do those types of liaisons.
Mr. Amadei.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you, Chief. I see you brought some folks on. My acting informal probation officer sitting back there on behalf of the union. I appreciate that. I feel a little safer knowing he's here. Yeah. Thank you for adding that. It's nice that we have an open committee atmosphere here. Hey, just something that I wanted to get with your folks, obviously offline, but I think the special event that you folks do that is probably the largest is the one you do every day, and that's the one at the entrances to garages and buildings. And so since I've been here, which seems like about 100 years, but not that long, it seems to me that we're still kind of doing the same stuff with the same technology and that sort of thing, and maybe that's the state of the art. But as you go in and out many times and watch your folks working, and you're sitting here and some days it's like, hey, it's all, you know, beer and horseshoes, at least for me, not for you guys, but, and other times it's like, it's a big sale and the place is jammed. I'd just like to offline maybe visit with whoever the appropriate folks are in your stuff and say, hey, what's the newest and the best in terms of allowing your folks to still do the job that they're doing, but if there's advances in technology or something like that. And it just kind of boils down to, we've been doing it this way for a while, maybe it's still the best way. But especially as we continue to go through the challenges for those people in the Cannon building, and as the architect folks, you know, matriculate around the campus and create those new flows and problems and capacities. Just something I'd kind of like to, and will, Mr. Chairman, let us know when we schedule that if anybody else wants to listen. Just kind of like to say, hey, if there's any new thoughts or any new mousetraps out there. And with that, I yield back.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the feedback. I agree with you. I think it always deserves a fresh look. We do have some proposals that I'm working on with the board that will not be in this fiscal year or likely the next, though we'll, in probably 21, perhaps 20, depending on the timing, we're going to bring forward some concepts that will change the dynamic for visitor screening in terms of venue and how we go about it. I think what we do currently meets the requirements for what is being asked. We do have some potential changes or additions, augmentation for the Capitol Visitor Center if we have some funding left over, and if we have any energy and money, we may be enhancing some of the secondary screening. Visitor Center first, and then we would look to the ancillary buildings.
Sir. Ms. McCollum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got three things. I want to follow up on metro safety and security. We talked about it a couple of times, and we've got the 3 stations around here, a lot of traffic. Members use them, staff use them, and of course our constituents who are visiting our Capitol are using them. We talked about communication and response capabilities, and you talked about some of the enhancements that were going to take place at Capitol South, and some more communication capabilities in the cars and platforms at the other metro stations. If you could give us a brief update on that. And then one of the things that I had asked you to think about possibly is to offer, working with Metro, for staff, what do you do if the train stops? What do you do if you smell smoke? I mean, we've got a lot of people who are on the trains regularly that I know some of them have been involved in a couple of instances where they've had to deboard trains, you know, even how to open a door. I mean, they don't let you practice opening up the airplane door, even when you're on the ground. But we do things for school bus safety. We encourage people to do fire drills and things in schools, and even in some of the larger businesses, they'll do drills every once in a while. So that's one thing, and I'll just put them all out there together. Second one is I don't have, and I know you'd provide it if I asked for it, but we don't have a big breakdown of what's going on with your canine budget. And you've increased a lot of canine, and canine have retirement just like everybody else does, and the new force of dogs and everything coming in. So can you tell us how you're, moving forward with your canine budget? And I know, being on a city council, our canine officers received a slightly different stipend because they had responsibilities after work with maintaining the dogs. And then the third one I have goes back to what you and the chair were talking about earlier about the waiver. I think there are certain jobs and certain assignments in that where, certain officers working until age 60, great. Sometimes things happen with bodies. People don't realize how much equipment you carry around, or if you've spent years sitting in a car, what that does to your back and your hips and everything like that. So I just want to make sure that, and I'm sure you are, it sounds like it, that you're talking and having great communication with the rank and file on how that works. And I think going up to age 40, if you're going to go to age 60, also maybe makes sense with people coming out of the military, retiring around here and doing that with expertise. So if you could just kind of touch on those 3 things. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Starting with the last, if I may, I agree. We do need to examine the 40 years. I understand the pitfalls of getting older. Feel it every day. Myself, we do have physical fitness. We have provide opportunities for our officers work out before work and after work during their lunch hour. We do have, we are partnering with Mr. Pico, CAO, wellness program, and we have a number of initiatives that we're looking at to benefit our employees as well. I do agree that it's important, and I always felt that the 37-year final hiring date did, in terms, eliminate some of the ability to bring military folks on who have a 20-year career in the military and retire at age 38. So I think this is a great benefit to bring on military folks who have the leadership and the dedication and proven track record to add them to our ranks. We also are looking to, through the 18 money, civilianize a number of positions. And I would also encourage vets to come in and work some of those, including wounded warriors, to fill some of these interior operational positions, radio dispatchers, command center technicians. They're critical roles, but they certainly can be staffed with vets and folks with military. In terms of our canines, FY18 funding we have 56 dogs that were allotted canine units, as well as the equipment that goes along with that. We're in the process of training, I believe it's 5 canine handlers at this time to replace some retirements. We had funding to replace some of our dogs. What we don't want to do is have the large scale, big ticket item. We try to life cycle. Each dog is different, though. So it's depending on health of the animal, the work ethic of the animal, the attention span. We generally get about 10 years of service out of a dog. Sometimes it's less because they get injured, just like people get injured, break bones, ACL. But we are monitoring the replacement schedule, employment schedule of the dogs. We recently went to a different vendor. We like the quality of it. It was a great move. The canine officers do get a higher level of pay because of the responsibility that is relevant to what they do. It's probably one of the most coveted positions in the department. Partners. They are extremely, the best way to say it is that we could not do our job without our canines. They are a force multiplier. For instance, last year, in 2017, we accomplished 170,000. If we were to rely on officers to do what those dogs do, we would grind this institution to a security. So we place a great emphasis. They're a very proud unit, and we really do get the sort of bang for the buck in terms of our ability to multiply our abilities. Difficult training, but when canine handlers complete their training, they are well on the way to being able to communicate with that dog. It's a true testament to dedication.
Please.
We have worked very closely with the Metro and with Amtrak as well in terms of our ability to scale, to have drills on platforms, to train our personnel in the procedures that are necessary when you respond down to the platform. We have also had tabletop exercises, and there is a large-scale, June 1st is a large-scale exercise that we're going to actually have a deployment on in terms of the Metro Tunnel near Capitol South, the Amtrak Tunnel. So we're well on the way to having that. And we have actually engaged in some of the training. Metro provided CO.
Yeah, I was going to say, based on some of the recommendations from the last meeting we had, if we had brought in Metro, maybe the staff training, we could have information out to the community. We held staff training, I believe it may have been CDC, to train staff, people that attend, that ride Metro, some of the various responses to a Metro emergency. So they came in, we worked with their emergency management division. They actually come in and provide, I believe they did 2 different trainings that was open to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just don't want you to find this out from anybody else, to my colleague from the Twin Cities, but there is a canine dog named Reno in the Capitol Police. I don't think there is one named Twin Cities, but whatever. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate that support.
I heard it was one of those ones with the bad hip and the bad knee.
But it was a lot faster than anyone from the Buckeye State. But thank you for bringing that up.
You hurt me.
Control this meeting here. All right, Mr. Newhouse.
And we won't get into getting 10 years of good work out of anybody. Well, either will we, Mark? Gentlemen, thank you for being here with us. Mr. Chairman, thanks for having this hearing. Most members don't get an opportunity to personally thank the chief and assistant chief, so thank you, gentlemen, for being here. And, not only to talk about the budget and the necessary perhaps changes that we may make there to benefit the work you do, but also express our appreciation to the fine work that the whole force does. We see on a daily basis every morning when we come to work. Sometimes, usually smiling faces that greet us to make sure that not only the public is safe, but we are too. So thank you very much for everything you do. I know in my district, I don't know that it's a whole lot different than others. We've had incidents, individuals that needed maybe more attention than we would have liked to have had to give them. I had an incident in my district office where a rock was thrown through a window. So let me just say I very much appreciate, my experiences have been that you've worked very well with local law enforcement agencies to help us feel secure and safe in our district offices as well. So a couple of different things I'd like to talk about with you. Just wanted to with this increased activity, not only here in the nation's capital, but around the country, talk about some of the measures, the safety measures that been able to put into place when you yourselves can't have a physical presence in the district. That's a huge challenge. We have a big country. I'm also guessing that I'm very similar. All our district offices have had increased levels of security put into place over the last year. And if you could talk a little bit about your interaction with the architect of the Capitol and making those and improving those security upgrades, appreciate that. And then something that we feel pretty secure here in Washington, D.C. most of the time. I think our district staffs are a little more vulnerable. So maybe if you could talk about any opportunities for increased amounts of training that might be available for those folks that work so hard on our behalf in our home state.
Certainly, sir, and I appreciate the feedback. I know that my troops are very proud to serve. The mission is very clear to us, and they take extreme pride in what they do every day. In terms of what we do in district offices, we can, through the Sergeant at Arms office, provide assessments for district location, provide security recommendations, and those are, we actually do the assessment. It was the Sergeant at Arms office that actually would direct that to occur. I believe that how the funding works is really works through the Sergeant. I'd have to defer to his office on that. We can provide your staff with security awareness training, and what that entails is that is well received. We've actually deployed, I believe, some on 46 deployments. Some of those are which our DPD agents and our threat assessment agents will go either electronically reach your offices, your district, or we can also travel and provide this service. And we'll talk about the issues, whether it's an unwanted guest, whether it's security of the venue itself, or what happens when you have threatening correspondence. We also deal directly in terms of threat investigations with your district staff. If your office contacts us, when any one of your offices contacts us, we will work to decipher what in terms of what the threat is. We'll make an assessment to determine whether or not it's an immediate threat where we need to get protection to you or your staff. Obviously, if you have an unwanted guest, we want you to dial 911, the local. We work very closely with the local authorities in terms of these investigations. When our threat investigations, we did about 3,800 of these last year, take place, we will coordinate through our FBI task forces. We will either deploy or we'll have an FBI agent investigate that matter. They're all joint investigations, depending on the circumstances, depending on the emergent need of the response. We will deploy personnel, and we will. Our position is that we will present all cases to the U.S. Attorney's Office where we can establish that a crime has been committed. And it may not be a technical threat. It may be some other type of it. It could be harassment, stalking. It could be any type of violation. Our agents are very well versed in the prosecution levels and thresholds. So we will work very closely with your staff in trying to either preserve evidence or obtain interviews in order to establish probable cause. We can do I don't want to miss any part of your question. We can conduct the assessments through the Sergeant Arm approval, and we can also, again, if you'd like to arrange for any, and this goes for all members, both House and Senate, security awareness training, we're happy to do it. It actually helps us when something does happen. It helps us. It helps your staff know what we're looking for. And we can do that. We can telephonically or BTC all of your groups together and do it all at once. Or like I said, we can deploy and do several of them, depending on the areas and how many members.
Good. Appreciate that. I think I've noticed in the last couple of days a new crop of officers. It could be my imagination, but there seem to be some new faces around. So, which is great. Just wanted to ask about your training programs, your ability to meet the attrition, retirements. Are there any issues that you face, challenges there that we should talk about, that we should be aware of?
Yeah, we have had 3 graduations in the last 6 or 7 weeks, all part of the.
So it wasn't my imagination.
No, it's
Okay.
not. And once they complete their 26 weeks of training, they go into what we call police officer training. It used to be called field training. They're out with an experienced officer for 8 weeks, and they're being observed. They're being taught to convey what's taught in the academy in a very sterile environment into the real world. And they're under the auspices of an experienced officer who are trained to evaluate, again, and make recommendations and take corrective action to the supervisor. It's a well-received program. It's interactive, and it really gets the student, they're the recruit officers. They're sworn officers, but they're under somebody's wing for a while. And we find that once we get them that 8 weeks of training, they've really been indoctrinated into how we do business. So I know that sometimes it looks like we may have excessive people on certain posts. They're generally the more junior, younger, if I can say that, officers, and they are learning. And frankly, it's a great learning experience for them because they're here, they're assigned during the peak period. They're assigned during the day shift and the early evening shifts, so that they really do get the full experience of what is going on Capitol.
You throw them into the deep end.
Absolutely, with no water wings on their arms, but they're never by themselves. They're always with an experienced officer. They're well trained, and frankly, they get they can always notch you back if they get transferred to an evening or a midnight tour, but you really get the full breadth of a vote on the House side, committee hearing on the Senate, confirmation. or head of state arrival in the Capitol. And these are things we want them to experience so that they can gain the knowledge.
And you're able to meet those needs.
Absolutely. Mr. Braddock's team has done an outstanding job in recruiting, hiring, training, deploying personnel. It ebbs and flows. We get very good candidates. We get an awful lot of candidates. We have some hiccups every now and then, with quality of the student, but I think that by and large, when our students complete the training program and they experience their field training, I am convinced, and I've seen the curriculum, I've seen the training, I've seen the quality of the instructors. We have police officers who can operate in any environment in this country. And I'm glad that we don't have recruiters here from other places trying to grab them, because they really are highly trained and they really do an outstanding job. I'm very proud of the troops, and really it's a testament to the staff that I have working with, both in operations and in the training arena and the hiring, background investigation. They do an outstanding job, and they really do identify the best candidates.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your almost 200-year tradition carrying on the Capitol. Appreciate it.
Chief, I want to ask you about your budget request for ammunition and weapons replacement. You request $6.7 million, including new weapons for DPD, and I note that there was an MP7 weapons training initiative that started more than a year ago. So I just wanted to ask a few questions about that. How many of your 180 DPD agents have completed MP7 weapons training? What percentage of DPD agents will complete MP7 weapons training by the end of the current fiscal year? And should we be concerned, do you have concerns with the amount of time that has passed since the first MP7 was received by Capitol Police and the number of agents that have been trained to date?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. We've decided, before we deploy the MP7, it should be noted that we do have the ability to deploy along with the M4, for assault rifle. We have that ability today, and we deploy that. The MP7 is a pilot program that the board has directed us to engage in terms of providing a weapon that meets the needs, that sort of bridges the gap between a true assault rifle and a handgun. We have today, and Steve, you have the numbers? We have 15 trained currently. I believe we're going to have another training soon. All DPD agents on at least one of the teams that will be outfitted with this weapon have been trained in familiarity with the weapon, even though they may not be trained to actually carry the weapon. So, a new weapons system takes time to procure. Some of the funding for additional weapons was in the 18 money, which I believe we began the process for. We just received a shipment of ammunition, 30,000 rounds or so, enough to train another class. So I'm confident that we have the ability to provide the type of weapons needed to cover our DPD agents. Based on direction from the board, we are starting with a smaller pilot on one particular detail, and we will expand that program to other details as we gain more information, more familiarity. Also issues we have to train people in order how to deploy it while you're carrying it. So there's a number of issues that we want to make sure that the officers that have to carry these weapons carry it safely, properly, and safeguard it in the proper way.
I think that's ultimately the genesis of the question, which is there's a request for additional new weapons for DPD, and the time to get folks trained, does that justify the amount of weapons you've asked for? Can people be trained to use all these weapons? Do you have enough staff officers that can be trained in time for this budget request?
I believe so. We will be able to train more as we get more ammunition. And the problem for the training, probably the biggest impediment is taking people offline, put them in a school. Takes away the opportunity to work in the field. Now, we have a graduating class of new special agents could be occurring in the next couple of weeks. We have another class slated for later in the year of DPD agents, and we may have the ability to have a third class in the intervening time. The second class I mentioned is slated for the end of the fiscal year. We may be able to have a class in the summer period. What happens with that is there's so many people. The eligibility for DPD is officers have to be off of their probation. So it's tied to tenure of the officers available to go to DPD. For each process, we can train 12 to 14 people. And the reason we only train that number is that it takes a significant amount of people to run the school. We take a certain amount of people offline, but what they do tactically, you can't teach 30 people at a time. You have to teach them incrementally. The size of a team and the ability, because otherwise it would take twice as long to train a number of people. We could run multiple schools, but then we get into having enough agents work the field and also put on the school. So I think we have a good plan. I think we have a good plan for future for DPD, building up its ranks. I think we have a good plan for future rotation through the Dignitary Protection Division. I think we have an excellent plan for firearms training. Again, the board wants to ensure that anytime we deploy a new platform, a weapon platform, that it's done incrementally, it's done appropriately, and it's done with the correct level of training necessary to safely deploy that weapon.
I want to turn your attention to our general expense when it relates to our employees and the topic of overtime, something we look at every year. I know you look at it very closely. I know it's an expense that's necessary in many cases when we have security needs and the right staff, the right place. You just have to do what you have to do. But overtime funding has increased 41% since fiscal year 2013. Hours have gone up approximately 230,000 in the last 5 years. Can you walk the committee through the overtime increases, what's causing them, and if you have concerns about that, and what you're doing to address that, and what we can do to help you address it?
Sure. It's a great question. There's always a balance between hiring FTE staff and using overtime. We allot a significant number of hours for unscheduled overtime for all of the various types of events. I can tell you, last year has been significant for unscheduled events. We've had multitudes of demonstration activities, civil disobedience arrests within the buildings. We've had a significant number of demonstrations outside that require permitted activities that require us to provide a level of coverage to maintain order. Sometimes you have competing interests that we have to put a police line in. Overtime and mission set. And I guess I should say from the outset, the staffing requirements that we've asked for in our budget proposal, are for new mission. We're staffed in the field at about 80% on all of the sections. Overtime is managed on a unit by unit basis. So each unit is staffed at about 80% of where they could be, and we fill the gap with overtime. There's scheduled overtime and unscheduled overtime. Scheduled overtime is things that we know, events that are going to occur. The concert series, State of the Union, an inaugural every 4 years, conventions where we provide coverage for members of Congress. So those things we can calibrate, we can calculate, and we can formulate. It's what really drives particularly over the last year, has been the increased mission sets required for just the regular day-to-day coverage of security matters. We had to bring in, now we have done a few things to counter that. Say, for instance, we have a demonstration where we're going to have 150 people. That drives a lot of personnel. We bring people in based on what we know so that we can cover those types of events. Because our goal is always to provide the Congress with the ability to do their work free of disruption and free of disorder. There's a level of service I think that members expect from a professional police department. And I think we provide that. Tactics have changed from some of these groups that come up. We have to respond sometimes to 100 different officers in an hour or simultaneously. And we want you to be able to do your work in your offices, and we will cover those events. The frequency causes, drives a lot of overtime. Though we have, when we do engage in civil disobedience arrests, we've been able to streamline that process to the point where it's very manageable, particularly with events where we use our cite and release, where normally it would take 3 hours to process an arrest. We can release hundreds of people within an hour. So I think we balance the costs with efficiencies. The assistant chief and Mr. Braddock, on a daily basis, monitor the overtime. We monitor what the usage is. We monitor leave. We have contractual obligations that allow us to work people within a certain parameter. So we never work anybody more than a double. We never work more than 64 hours pay period of overtime. And that's really, we assign the work, but that work is then officers are able to trade that overtime slot, if possible, to someone who wants to work it if they don't want to work it. So they have the ability to sort of control their own fate once they're drafted to work overtime. Now, there are events that require us to manage very directly. For instance, we may have civil disobedience going on in the House chamber where there's a big vote. We may hold over day shift for an hour to be able to manage those arrests. If it dissipates, we let people go. So we manage it to the hour. We manage it hands-on. All of my commanders are roll up your sleeves commanders out in the field. They're managing it day to day, and they're out there with the troops. So we manage it. We look at it. At a point where it becomes necessary to ask for more personnel, we certainly would come forward and do that.
Yeah, Chief, that's my question, I think, ultimately, is if this is an issue of we just have a lot more sporadic, spontaneous events and things that are impossible to have people just sitting around waiting for, because 1 week we may have 10 of them, the next week we may have nothing, right? That's basically the issue. That makes sense. The question is there a general need for more officers that would help reduce that at all? Is that part of the equation?
I think as we look at increasing necessity to cover, we certainly have more requests to cover committees. We have more requests to cover events that are occurring. And the individuals, the officers that we asked for in this request, the 19 requests, are those for the new mission. As we look, and we will look at the trends, we will continue to look at the trends to determine whether or not there's a need to increase our staffing to cover routine.
Well, particularly if it saves us money, right?
Right.
I mean, that's if it's a net savings. Right. I think that's something the committee needs to look at. If it's going to cost us more money because we're going to have more personnel and we're still going to have about the same number of overtime hours, then that doesn't really help us
Right.
for that topic.
It's a delicate balance, and I know that our Inspector General recently looked at our overtime. It validated what was validated several years ago. We are short a number of FTE, and I think, I don't know that we're at the point at this point where we would increase our staffing in lieu of overtime, but we will look at that very closely and work very closely with your staff.
Okay.
To look at that.
Great. Thanks. Mr. Ryan.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Chief, I want to get your take on the pre-screeners. So we're obviously a very important part. You start talking about the metro. You start talking about increasing the range in which we can understand what's happening out there. And there's been some reports that maybe the pre-screeners aren't out and about like we would want them to be, especially when it's cold and rainy, and generally nobody wants to be outside at that point. What are we doing to assure the members and the people working on the campus that strategy that we have is being implemented properly and that's getting done?
Yes, sir. The pre-screeners are there.
Do we have a mechanism that's monitoring that, I guess would be the direct question.
Absolutely. We have, and I'll talk about the inclement weather in a moment. the reason we have the pre-screeners, everyone sort of has the same level playing field. They provide us with effective, visible, physical presence. Some of our most vulnerable. Over the years, since 1995, we've had a number of studies that call for having pre-screeners. It certainly works very well here at the Capitol itself. We are pushing the envelope out to the office buildings so that we have eyes and ears out. The goal is for them to, one, prevent things from happening, but provide that visible physical presence. Their eyes and ears, they give us the ability to quickly lock down the door if necessary. They have the ability to remotely lock down the door in a couple of places here on the hill. They have the technology tested in three places to be able to lock those doors. So I find that we want to, the goal is always to push the threat as far away as possible and screen people. Ultimately, you don't want to screen people inside the city, which we do out of necessity. The CVC model is perfect example of how well that can work. You push the screening outside of sort of the envelope of the building, and you have the appropriate sort of infrastructure. Buildings are historic buildings. They were never designed for the equipment that we have installed. The goal and the security model for each access point is to have pre-screener and overwatch. I think for a long time we have been able to risk mitigate. I think, and the board agrees, and this is one of our initiatives, to have eyes outside and then have the overwatch. It really closes a vulnerability. The secondary benefit is it helps manage the lines. I know that lines are always an issue, particularly in the spring, when we have a lot of people coming to the hill. A tourist group, a school group, people lobbying. It gives us the ability to help manage, move people. Sometimes people don't want to move. They don't want to break up from their group. But at least we have the ability to provide them information. Now, if an officer isn't as tentative as they should be, that's certainly a supervisor. The supervisors are first line supervisors are maintaining, the awareness and presence. I have authorized officers who are on pre-screener posts in extreme weather to step inside the door. You should be maintaining their vigilance and be looking out at the threat. The threat's outside, it's coming from the outside. If they're not doing that, then that's a supervisory issue, and we can address that. But the goal is to have the eyes, looking out so that they can take action if necessary, prevent that. I think that it also provides a level of comfort, I think, to staff, visitors, when they see a visible presence. I think the value of that is going to be
Yeah, I'd like to talk maybe a little bit more about that close. Thank you.
Mr. Amidei? Well, if there are no further questions, then Chief and your team, thank you for your testimony today. Thanks for your work on behalf of the Capitol and our constituents and the many members that serve in this body that are counting on you to keep them safe. We want to make sure you have the resources necessary and that your employees have the means to do their job. So we'll continue to look forward to working with you and a good budget. And now I have specific comments I have to make. Again, I want to acknowledge our guests who joined us, the Open World Leadership Center guests from Tajikistan. Thank you for joining us today. Hopefully, yes. Yes, we appreciate the delegation from Tajikistan for joining us for today's hearing. And hopefully you can take back some pointers on how conduct an efficient the spirit of bipartisanship that reigns here. I invite my legislative branch committee members to meet with our guests briefly after the conclusion of the hearing. Thank you for your appearance today. We'll continue to work with you as we proceed with this year's budget process. Subcommittee stands at recess until tomorrow, April 12th at 10 a.m., at which time we will receive testimony from the Government Publishing Office. Meeting Meeting adjourned.